Okay, looks like we are live. Welcome. This is season 2, episode 9. The cool thing about this show, BenThere, is that I get to kind of interview people and talk to people from all over the world, which is a treat in and of itself. But the thing for me that I love more than anything is I also get to kind of reconnect with people I grew up with, people I've known for a couple of years, so to speak. My guest today is definitely no exception. She and I just got done talking prior to going live, and I hate to do this to Erin McKenney, but I think Erin gets bumped. I know she's going to be watching, but she gets bumped in terms of who I've actually known the longest that I've got to interview. And
don't get her mad at me. Don't get her mad at me.
Well, I've known you by about a minute longer, I guess I could say. But my guest today is Metta Dael. I've known Metta. This is kind of trippy. I've known you since I was 7 years old, Metta. This is wild. Yeah, when I first experienced the expat life and moving overseas, you and I were actually booked in the same hotel with our families in the Hilton Hotel in Hong Kong, and that was my first experience in getting to know you. Everything panned out. You and I are the same age. Your sister, my brother, are the same age.
Yep.
Our parents were the same age. It's just everything kind of lined up at once. I hate to date us, but this is we're talking 1983.
We are.
Yeah, it's been a few years, but this is awesome. I'm so excited to talk to you in more detail. I'm just happy we got to talk about 20 minutes before we went live, and I have a big old smile on my face just reliving the childhood days, and I can't wait to get into stuff. So, Metta Dael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so awesome to be here. I think I think of all the people who are actually more excited about this besides you and I think our moms are probably just giggling.
Yes. Yeah, totally. My mom's been talking about you all day. I talked to her earlier today, and she kept, I want to see it. Make sure I can see it. I'm like, yes, ma'am. So she was happy that you were on today. But look, we're on a limited schedule these days, so I want to kind of get right to this. But if you don't mind, the first question I always ask everybody, just to summarize your upbringing, where your family's originally from, where all you lived growing up, how your family ended up overseas, your college days, and where you are now. Before you do that, though, what's cool about this too is even though I've known you forever, I read your bio. I learned things about people that I've known for, here we go, Metta, you ready for this? Almost 40 years.
Oh my God.
I know, I feel it too. But I learned something about you when you sent me the bio that I didn't even know. So this is kind of cool for me. I thought you came to Hong Kong from the Philippines, and turns out, no, not even close. So if you don't mind just kind of bragging about yourself for the first couple minutes, it's all you.
Yeah, so my family left. My dad was working for Ford Motors in the Philippines, and we left when I was almost 3, when he got picked up by Colgate-Palmolive, and we moved to Greenwich, Connecticut. So we went fresh off the boat. Talk about diving into the land of privilege and living abroad. Oh my God. So we literally moved to Greenwich, Connecticut. We were there for a few years, moved back to the Philippines to wait for our next post for a couple months, then moved to Indonesia. Here's where Indonesia gets a little wonky. Our visas, because we're all Philippine passport holders, wasn't clear for Indonesia. And so every weekend we flew to Singapore.
Holy cow. Really?
And spent like half of our life going back and forth to Singapore.
So this is early 80s, right? Late 70s, early 80s?
Actually, very early 80s.
Okay.
So where we lived, in Indonesia, we lived in Surabaya. There was nothing there. I woke up every morning to the call to prayer at the mosque, and soldiers marching outside of our window. There was only like 6 kids in our school. And so then we were in Indonesia for a while, then moved to, between Indonesia and Singapore, then moved to Bangkok, then Hong Kong. And then from there, I went to boarding school.
Okay. How old were you when you ended up in boarding school?
Sophomore year. I finished my 9th grade year. My parents went through a pretty rough divorce my 9th grade year. And I don't think most people know this, but Hong Kong is known to be like the capital of Asian divorces. And I felt like we just rode that train. And it was, we were a pretty visible family in Hong Kong at that point. And so I think my sister saw it coming, and my sister wanted to go to boarding school ever since she was like 6. Okay. So she had gone the year prior. And so I was kind of, going through the muddy waters by myself with my parents. Then I split. My dad stayed in Hong Kong for a while. Then he moved to Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay.
My mom moved back to the Philippines, and so I would split time kind of going on breaks to Phoenix, going longer breaks to the Philippines. And that's what I call my time living there pretty much.
Yeah.
So when I'd go visit mom. But then I would Massachusetts, Pennsylvania for college, New York for grad school, and then stayed in New York and then moved back up to Massachusetts. So been here since.
Nice. Yeah, you and I met, just so that the people watching know that don't know either one of us. Yeah, we met, I guess we both were at Hong Kong International School, HKIS. Mm-hmm. I guess I knew this now that I think back. I mean, like I said, it's been a minute since you and I have taught class, but I thought you graduated from HKIS. But yeah, as soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, that's right. She left early. Yeah.
So I stayed ninth grade when the new Titanium campus had been open for a couple of years, and I'm still pretty connected to the HKIS folks, which is great.
Yeah, even though I ended up in Taipei for most of my overseas life, yeah, I still same way. Like there's still a ton of, Hong Kong was my first experience of everything. And I mean, you actually, I guess you were overseas doing the overseas thing before I was, but what a perfect way for someone to start their overseas experience. Because Hong Kong at the time, right? So English friendly. We're talking 1983. Yep. Yes, we're old. We've already established that. But
British colony still.
Yeah, British colony. Yep. Everything was in English. I thought everybody else was strange that didn't go somewhere else, right? I thought it was like if you stayed in your home country, your passport country, that was weird. I didn't know any better. But yeah, just like you, Hong Kong was a perfect start for me. I know my brother would say that as well. So.
And I think Hong Kong was a little different back then. HKIS was predominantly like a mix. Like now it's much more heavy Asian, but back then you never know who's sitting next to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. For how long, for whatever. Yeah. You never knew. And Taipei American School is the same way now as well. When I was there, I was pretty much the norm looking, right? And it's different now. Still proud to call TAS my alma mater and all that stuff, and even HKIS. But yeah, it's just times change, change and stuff happens. But so let's talk about that then. I mean, you've been all over the place, and like I said, I learned things about you just by reading your bio. Where do you consider home then? What's the concept of home in your eyes?
The great part so my job now is I work at admissions for the boarding school I went to, Northfield Mount Hermon, and part of the reason I love it, it was the only place in the U.S. that didn't ask me to define home during my interview. Everyone.
I guess you're mad at me then, right? So.
Well, no, meaning like everyone needed, and as you know, for TCKs, we don't have an answer for that.
Which is why I ask it. Yeah, that's right. Why I love to hear that. Yeah.
It's not where your passport is, because that's not necessarily where you grew up. Is it where my license is? I don't know. No. And so that's why I landed at NMH, and now I get to find kids who are searching for that same answer. And it typically ended up being NMH's school, ended up being home, because it's where I brushed my teeth the longest. I know that sounds really weird. Like,
I love that answer.
Like New York, I definitely did. But there's something about, 6 girls crowding around a sink, brushing your teeth together, talking smack about the day, now it's even more solidified home. I think, wherever my spouse and my kids are, has become home. But, Martha, she spent my partner, Martha, spent a year at ISKL.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. So she's TCK too.
Yeah. So she only spent a year there. Her parents went over there her dad was an exchange student in Malaysia at a university there teaching physics. And we talk all the time about going abroad, always. And so, we think about when we're going to get back abroad and just the lifestyle that you can live abroad. We can't afford Hong Kong.
No, not right now. No,
that's for sure. But so I think home for me is definitely where I'm brushing my teeth for that moment. I'm wicked comfortable in hotels, as you know.
Thank you.
We all are.
My wife thinks I'm crazy because I actually sleep better in hotels, but I think that's a product of growing up the way we did.
I definitely feel real comfortable in a hotel.
Airplanes and hotels, we're the odd ducks, I think.
Yeah.
I can fall asleep before the airplane even takes off. That's how I'm wired. It's in my DNA. No, I love that. No, I love the brushing teeth thing. Home is where you can feel comfortable brushing your teeth. I love that.
There you go.
Where this wasn't a term, or maybe it was, and we just didn't know. But this wasn't really a term when you and I were growing up. I'm glad it's out there now.
Mhm.
But third culture kid, the TCK thing.
Yeah.
When did you first hear about that? Like the term itself? Do you remember?
I think I found words to it in college. I feel like our generation, or the 3 years above us and 3 years below us, were in kind of this wonky, weird cycle in schools where they either didn't know anything the 3 years before us, or they learned a lot the 3 years after us.
Yeah.
And so I think we were the first kind of wave of these TCKs. Like the 70s and 80s didn't have as much, but the kids who were growing up in the 90s were so formulated by, and I think it's Reaganomics really who put it into play, right? I think that's what was so much about getting our parents out there and working and creating opportunities abroad for the United States that open up those doors for us. And so people started bringing in these kids into their schools and their companies and saw that they navigated the world so differently. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's when someone's like, what's going on here? And like, I have kids now who have 5-6 passports.
That's insane.
They're like, I was born in this one. My parents have citizenship in this one, but I can claim this one. And so I think the term solidified and probably in college, and then grad school was part of my research work that I did. Just trying to understand, like, I guess identity was starting to be a big thing. Starting to process identity is a big thing. And that's where I first was like, oh, yes, somebody gets me.
Yeah, you beat me to the punch, because that was the whole thing. Even coming back to the States, I went to a small school in North Carolina first, and I looked the part, 6'2", athletic, played college baseball. I blended right in visually. Intrinsically, no way.
Yeah.
I was so out of place and so messed up for a long time. Even now, like, I still struggle,
Yeah.
But it's doing the show, it's concepts, it's talking to people like you that went through the same exact thing I did.
I think, this is where I do think race is a bigger issue, because I think my white friends had an even harder time.
Oh, really?
Right? So I have friends who are born in Hong Kong, white, blonde hair, blue eyes.
That's me. Yeah,
right?
That's me. Yeah.
Got to wherever they were living and was like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. What shenanigans just came out of your mouth? Or, so I think you had it harder, versus by virtue of me not being white, I was known to be different. Yeah. Right. What was not understood was where the hell the Philippines was and where Hong Kong was. Right. So, we always joke about it. How many times do you get asked if you speak Japanese? Yeah. Right. Right. Or, the fact that we know what a wet market is versus, a supermarket. And people didn't understand that. And people had a really hard time. I think the hard part for me is talking about class. Mm-hmm. Really struggling to talk about class, where, you talk about, I went to Bali for vacation, or I went, okay, that's like people go in Florida here, right? Yeah. Because it's a 2-hour flight away. Mm-hmm. It's right there. For us who lived in Southeast Asia, or talking about how none of us owned a house until we moved back to the United States, or owned a car, right? People didn't understand that, or even having a household helper and being a norm. And I remember getting really reamed for that. Like, just people not understanding that and being like, oh, I should really reel back talking about that.
Yeah, and it was norm for us, and it wasn't bragging. It wasn't, I'm better than you by any means. It just, that's what we knew. That's what I thought everybody went through. Probably you too, right? So,
or we say, oh, we went on a junk for the weekend. Yeah. What's a junk? Oh, it's like a yacht. Yeah. What? Yeah. Oh, it's what we all do. Who's we all? All right. And
totally.
Yeah. So I think that understanding how class played into the privilege of living abroad was probably something that I was not ready for coming back to the United States.
Absolutely. No, I'm 100%. We kind of jumped the gun. I want to talk about acclimation a little more in a minute, but staying on that note then, excuse me, let's pros and cons then though. I mean, because there's definitely, we just kind of hinted at the cons. Let's talk pros. What were the pros about growing up internationally?
Oh, I can talk to
Yeah, I was gonna. Should I get comfortable and let you just go?
I can talk to anybody, like name it. I remember working in New York. I worked for this nonprofit in New York for 6 or 7 years, and we were at this fundraiser, and the fundraiser had like, big wigs supposedly there, and they were like, oh, we, meaning the education folks, you're going to do a presentation later, but you guys should really stay back here. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. So I started looking at the list, and it was like one of my dad's former bosses from Colgate.
Really?
A group of people who worked with Zalda Vitri's family. Do you remember Zalda Vitri?
Yeah, the name definitely rings a bell. Yeah.
Zalda Vitri's family at Philip Morris, right? And people that I can easily talk to. And so I was like, are you sure you want to keep me back in the hole? Right. And I literally had to like validate myself for them. Mm-hmm. Right. And talk. And they're like, oh, well, then you should go out there. And I'm never afraid of talking to people, mm-hmm. whether it be, I don't know, a bigwig or someone, the guy in the corner. Yeah. I'm really, really comfortable with it. And I like hearing stories of people and how they came to be.
Which is exactly why I do the show. Because I like hearing stories. Plus, number one, I think I said this already, it's almost therapeutic for me when I do these, because I get to realize I wasn't alone in my thoughts, even way back in the day. But yeah, it's the same thing. I just like people's stories. I've known you since 40 years, and I'm learning things about you today.
Stop playing that.
Sorry. 39 and a half years or whatever it is. Yeah. So I think it's really, to be honest, it's only like 37 years, but who's counting, right? It's whatever. But everybody's got a story, and I love that. Like, I like even you. I'm learning things about you, so I can totally relate to that. What about if you want to dive deeper, if you're done with the pros, any other cons that you can think of?
Everyone always thought we were okay.
Yeah. That's right. Wow. Yeah.
Everyone always thought we were okay, that because we knew how to navigate spaces, we knew how to talk, we knew how to integrate and talk about anything. Like, you could talk about baseball, you could talk about Chinese food, you can talk about, the smell that you cannot get past when you walk through like a wet sewer, like in Southeast Asia, that distinct smell. With such ease that everybody always thought we were okay. So no one ever stopped to ask us if we were okay.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great point. I never even thought of that, but you're 100% right.
And I think that part was rough because everyone expected you were okay. You were like, well, I gotta be okay. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that was hard because I don't think a lot of TCKs, when they're struggling with that identity piece and that shift, we know how to ask for help.
We don't. Well, I just thought it was me. I thought I was the one with the issues because, we all wear masks, right? Even no matter what, but we all wear masks as just people, period.
Yep.
Then you throw in the TCK angle. I thought it was just me. I thought I was the only one going through shit. Let's be honest, Yeah. I was just like, okay, it must be just me because everybody else seems to be doing just fine. People that grew up like I did.
Yep.
Turns out they weren't. Now that we've become adults and we've talked and we've discussed things, they weren't. We all struggled.
Yeah.
Same exact reasons too. We just were all too afraid to say it. So you're 100% right.
So I think that's probably the hardest part. I think I knew how to make friends. I didn't know how to be a good friend.
Wow. Okay.
I knew I had my girls. Like, I am probably one of the nicest people you will meet.
I'll vouch for that.
Right. Yeah. But I didn't learn how to be kind until much later in life. So the best way to put it is there are people who literally give you the shirt off their back. I never was that person. I would buy you the shirt. Right. I would be like, let me go buy you a shirt versus giving that. I didn't know that there was a difference there. And I think that's become a huge distinction in my life, especially the way the world is now. And it's something that I constantly have to work at. And it wasn't until I probably burned a bunch of bridges and had to come back and fix all those. I mean, Call a spade a spade. I was always really well known on campus. I was a popular kid. I played 3 varsity sports. I was that kid. And so with that, I expected there to be a persona. It wasn't cool in the world yet to be a kind kid like that. And there's a difference. And I think, I have to go back now, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people who are going to watch this being like, oh yeah, I was one of those people who Metta had to come back to in her later years and be like, yeah, I didn't do that real well. Right. And kind of eat humble pie and say, I've gotten better. I know better now. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's
just part of life and maturing and realizing what matters, right? So
yeah, but we never had to really dig deep to create friends where we were, because we were there for 2-3 years and then we were out. Yeah. Right. And it's not like nowadays where you still connect with them. Back then, you never knew if you were going to reconnect.
No, well, I don't think we ever thought.
Yeah.
Right? Period. Yeah. I totally agree. Like, we'll talk about this later, but the fact that you and I reconnected in college, so crazy story. Can't wait to tell it. We're going to get to it. Don't worry. That's called a teaser, by the way. We're gonna tease that right now so people stick around for the end. But yeah, I 100% agree.
Funny story. I'm so excited to share that story.
I know, right? Yeah, there's only a handful of people that even know that story, and I can't wait to get to that. Even people that know us probably don't know that story, so we'll get to that. But I 100% agree with you. You never really thought. I mean, nobody knew in the 80s and 90s the internet would be a thing, Facebook would be a thing, and you'd be able to reconnect. So 100% agree with you. What about international school memories? Are there any that stand out to you? I mean, you spent some time in a couple. I thought it was just HKIS, but you definitely went to a couple. Any distinct moments or memories?
Yeah. You are actually not the oldest person I know.
Ooh, that hurts a little bit right here.
I know. Yeah. So when I was in Bangkok, I reconnected with 2 people. Yeah. That I went to school with in Bangkok. One is Sarah DeBolt, who actually I reconnected with her through my job. She was living in Colombia, of all places. Wow. I tracked her on Facebook, and she was teaching there in Colombia. Now lives, I think, Sarah, where are you? Cali now? And we reconnected there. And then Ben Pauker, also Bangkok. His dad was my dad's boss, actually.
Oh, wow.
And we reconnected, and he's in DC. But I remember being a pink lady with Sarah DeBolt and Anna Young, wherever she is, and Ben Pauker designing our school poster, which was like the big green machine for like one of our field days, and it was like a green robot. That was pretty proud of my life. That was probably my oldest memory. Hong Kong, I remember actually us sitting in Miss Sadek's class.
Let's talk about Sadak for a second. We got to hit pause. I think she's watching. She already said that, or she already liked the idea of this whole thing. And I got to brag about that. A couple of years ago, I was at a TAS reunion in San Diego, Taipei American School reunion in San Diego, knowing full well that Mrs. Sadak, and I hope she's watching this, she was living in San Diego. I just shot her a Facebook thing saying, hey, I haven't seen you in at the time, 25 plus years, whatever, but I'm in San Diego. Any chance you'd like to grab a coffee, whatever. She and her husband came down.
I love it.
She doesn't look any different.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, it looks no different. Yeah, right. It was like I walked into the 5th grade class all over again. It was
so sad for kids who never got her as a teacher. Like, if people talk about a teacher that impacted you, she didn't just impact one kid, she impacted the whole class.
She made me feel like I mattered, and I think that's probably why I spent so many years in education as a teacher. I mean, she was the reason. I've always admitted that.
Who knows that stickers did such a big deal? I mean, God, I love them stickers.
Do you remember calling us chickadees? All right, there you go.
But I remember our desk sitting together, and I remember Andrew Quist was next to me.
Yeah.
And
I saw him a couple of years ago too, by the way. Actually, I just saw him a year and a half ago. He was on his honeymoon, and he and his wife were driving around, and they ended up in Utah for a little while. My wife and he and his wife went out to dinner. So
I love it. Well, he loved the chocolate cake that we always made, and so I would always make sure I brought him 2 pieces of chocolate cake. And then, of course, what other school do you know? Thank you, Kelly Ung and her dad had McDonald's for their lunches.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, my dad was also part. He was a McDonald's guy too, but
that's
Kelly's dad was in charge of all that, but my dad was on that ship, so to speak. So
like, okay, so they were like, so did you have lunch chits? I was like, no, we had milk chits, and then you could order a hamburger, a fish wedge, or a cheeseburger. And I
always got the McChicken. Always. Way too many or too much mayonnaise on the sandwiches, but it's all good.
I mean, what? Oh my goodness, right? So like, I think that is a really, really big deal for me.
Yeah.
Just little things like that. Then of course your brother knows this. Gymnastics in Hong Kong was such.
That's how I remember you too. Connected to that, I was too tall. I was never allowed to do it, but I was always too tall right away. So yeah.
So I think that, which I reconnected with Gus Nader recently.
Gus, holy cow, yeah.
Tracked him down through LinkedIn. Real weird, but like just moments like that, and sitting up on the wall, in the high school, there was that stone wall that kids could sit up on, and we would just sit up on there and just, I mean, Hong Kong was our playground. We got to tool around because it was so safe. Yeah. Our parents would literally like, see you at dinner, and they would let us go crazy because everyone knew each other. Yeah. Right. I have this great picture of you at my 5th grade birthday, and we're playing like chicken or something, and I'm on your shoulders, and I'm like, what? We're at there's 30 kids in the pool.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Right. And so things like that, like, always our house has become that of just people constantly in our house. That's another thing that makes it home for me.
I love it.
People in and out, and that's what I want, and I remember from just being abroad, just people.
Yeah. So, to this day, people, and that's one, to me, the biggest blessing of the internet and Facebook and all that is being able to reconnect.
Yeah,
just completely out of the blue, people, you get a little Facebook friend thing, and I'm like, oh wait, holy cow! Like it takes you a minute to understand, like, and then you think, wait a minute. In my eyes, it's always like, are they Hong Kong or are they Taipei?
Yeah,
they're kind of diverse between the two, but yeah.
I have a hard time now. Like, there are definitely some people who look exactly the same. You look exactly the same to me. Jason looks exactly the same to me. Yeah. But there are some people who look different than I'm like, wait, who, what? And then people that I'm still really, really, really curious about, like where they are. I pretty much found everybody in Mrs. Sadak's class.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, it all comes back to Sadak. I've said that for a long time, but like the people I'm closest to from my Hong Kong days, it was all that 5th grade class, Mrs. Sadak's 5th grade class. I can guarantee you, I think of 25 kids, I'm friends with 22 of them on Facebook and have reconnected with 20. It's just
crazy.
That's a tip of the hat to her, because she made that class so just warm and welcome and accepting, and you wanted to be better for her, right? Yeah. Like, it's just, people that are watching this have no idea who we're talking about. Sorry, yeah. We're gonna get to just kind of chat for a minute, but yeah.
When you think about the one teacher who was your teacher, she was it.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm not shy about saying that. I've told her that to her face. I've written about it. I mean, she is the reason I became a teacher. She made me feel. First off, she was the first teacher that ever made me feel smart, which I loved. I like to think I'm smart, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you think you're smart, but it's one thing to hear your parents say you're smart. It's another thing to hear like a totally separate person tell you you're smart. And she told me I was a good writer. I can just hear her still. I mean, here we go again, 30 plus years ago. But yeah, I wish everybody could have had a Sadak. That's all I can come back and say.
I definitely had 2. I had Dennis Larkin, who, he taught older for a while. Then he became my 7th grade teacher, and he was the first teacher.
Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
I know the name. I never had him, obviously. We left after I finished 5th grade, and then we left.
Yeah, he didn't. It was kind of like where your work was good in 5th and 6th grade, and as soon as you hit middle school, you needed to bump it up a notch. Yeah. And he was definitely one who was like, this isn't good enough. And I was like, what? I'm a BS in my whole life. Now you want me to and he ended up being in Manila afterwards. His wife grew up in India, and so he himself, by virtue of his wife and his kids, was very osmosis TCK. Yeah. And his he ended up, I think now he's either in Senegal or Ghana. He and I email quite a bit sometimes, but I think having a teacher who understood what we were going through as kids was really important as well.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Let's get back to your acclimation thing then. So like once you did, I guess you came back to the States a little bit before college because you were boarding school. How was that transformation once you came back for, I guess, high school? Because you were on your own then, right? You were flat. Your parents were still overseas, and then you were here. How did that go?
Yeah, it was really weird. Like I didn't know how to dress for here. I had no idea what L Bean was. I didn't, and I mean, I went to a New England boarding school, right? Yeah. So I didn't know what that was. I was still in my Benetton Esprit world, right?
Yep.
So, and sophomore year, I had a really hard time. My parents were going through that ugly divorce. I got in trouble in school. And I hadn't had to prove myself in so long because I'd been in Hong Kong so long. Mm-hmm. And so now I remember, I was always a strong athlete in Hong Kong, and I remember playing a pickup game in the gym. It was me and all boys and one other girl. And I was always used to being the one who played with all the boys. Mm-hmm. That was nothing new to me. And this girl, she ended up going to Princeton to play basketball, but smoked me. And I had no idea what that was like. I was like, what do you mean? Like, there are girls here who can go toe to toe with me? What? Yeah. And I learned really quickly, right, that I had to prove myself academically, that people didn't know me for what I could do. And I needed that challenge. It made me grow up really, really quickly, but it was hard. I learned how to do laundry. Yeah, on my own. That was a big thing. I love to do laundry. And it was also a school. Work never bothered me. I remember Jim Miller. I don't know if you know Jim Miller. He and I were friends in 7th grade. He got me a job at Videography. It was like a video store, like up on Robinson Road or something like that. And so working or working hard wasn't foreign to me. Just I wasn't used for things to come as easily to me. And so I had to figure out what I needed to do. But NMH has a work job program where everyone does, at that point, 10 hours a week of working something, either working on our farm or cleaning the dorm or working in the kitchen. And I hated working and cleaning in the dorm. I loved working in the kitchen. I don't care if I washed dishes for 6 hours because I was around people and could chat. And I just realized how important being around people to motivate me was at that point. So yeah, but
I love that. No, that's great.
Not good.
I want to continue with that then. Professionally, if you don't mind, because you and I kind of have this in common. When I was in Shanghai, I was a director of admissions for Shanghai Community International School. Loved it. Came back to the States for family reasons, all that stuff. But I mean, I had planned on being in Shanghai for a long time, but life happens, right? But explain your current position as the director of international missions at Northfield Mount Hermon, right? How did you were Mount
Hermon? So essentially, I get to go all over, and NMH has a really big connection with having international students. Their first graduating class actually had an international student part of it. So they had it was known to be a very progressive school back then. It had the first freed slave to go to Harvard. I believe the first Chinese student to graduate from Harvard came from NMH. So we've always had, and he came during the Qing Dynasty. So we've had like this long history of international students. First, it was a school founded to educate women, dairy farmers actually, who could not afford an education. If you could afford an education, we sent you down to a boarding school down the street. If you couldn't, you came here and we subsidized your education. And so they've always had this other way of looking at opportunity. So NMH by design has always been 25% international. At its height, I would say
I found this on the web.
Do you hear that on my phone?
There you go. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's all right.
I haven't said. So when I was probably a student here, we probably had 70 countries. Now we have 54 this year. The most I've had since we've been here is 57. but I get to go all around the world, and most of my stuff has been to Southeast Asia, and then I send a team out to the rest of the world to just get awesome kids to come. So now I have someone who goes to Dubai in the Middle East, someone who goes to Eastern Europe and Western Europe, someone that does South America and Central America. But when I first came, I was doing it all. And that was bananas because I literally was on a plane for weeks. Now I do about 4 or 5 weeks at a time.
Even with COVID? Like, what's going on with COVID?
Oh, so that was weird. This is the first year. I think I posted on Facebook. This is the first year ever in my life. I have not had a stamp in my passport to another country.
Well, I guess I can go eye to eye with you there. Not only the passport stamp, but next week, I'm trying to think of what date it is right now. Yeah, the first week of March, it'll be a year since I've actually been on an airplane.
Yeah, I haven't been on an airplane in over a year. That's
makes no sense.
Crazy to me. And normally in my travel, I do about 16 stops.
Yeah.
So I'm on like 20 planes, right? And not anymore.
No. And on that note, though, we're going to go sidetracking here a little bit and talk about our first side story. I can vouch for the fact that you've been all over the place because you and I were supposed to meet up when I was living in Shanghai 3-4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, how cool is this girl, folks? I hope you're watching because she was telling me she was coming to Shanghai. My schedule was busy. Her schedule was busy. There was a quick window that we could actually meet up. By the way, my brother's chiming in real quick. I don't know if you can see that down there.
Hi, Jason.
There was a quick window where you and I were going to be able to meet up. It didn't work out. However, you asked me if I needed anything stateside. What did I ask you to bring me?
Like iced tea or water packets.
Yeah, it was flavored water. Not in a million years thinking you would. Not you personally. I just thought it's such a weird random thing to ask anybody to bring, right? I kid you not, folks. This girl right here, I showed up. We didn't actually meet. You and I never connected.
I left it at the hotel desk for you.
Left it at the hotel, and I picked it up like, how cool is she, man? Like, this is after so many years. Like, I never saw you, but your stamp was on those water packets, and I loved it for it. Thank you so much. Still, I never actually thanked you.
I know how much when you don't have that one thing.
Yeah.
And you get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I miss seeing you, but at the same time, you left it there, and it made me smile like that whole day. I remember just thinking, how cool is she? That's badass. Just
I'm so glad.
Connections from elementary school. Mrs. Sadak's class. Here we go again, right?
Yep.
But yeah, I don't think I actually formally thanked you, but here we go. Everybody watching, thank you for doing that for me.
You're so welcome.
Yeah. So there's our first sidetrack. We're going to get to another sidetrack in just a little bit, but very cool. No, very cool. So I'm looking at the clock here. We have about 25 minutes. So I want to make sure we get some of these in. We talked about the COVID thing. Former jobs. This is what shocked me too. I had no idea. I gotta brag about you for a second. So your former jobs included working in New York theater singing. We're gonna talk about that. You were a production assistant in a number of movies. We're gonna talk about that. An extra. I love this because young kids watching won't know this, but MTV Jams. Right?
Yes.
You did research for Nickelodeon's children's shows.
Yeah.
And here's my favorite because you and I are the same breed. And again, back to Sadak. You were a teacher at one point. I spent 18 years in education. I'm still technically a part of education as a coach. Hey, look who just joined us here.
Hi, Miss
McKinney. We were talking about you prior to going live. We'll get back to that in just a minute. But back to you. I didn't know you were a teacher. What did you teach?
Taught English.
Okay.
I think I was a terrible teacher.
No.
Yeah. Yes. There is something about teachers about being able to deliver something every day that makes it exciting for a kid. I just didn't have it. I am an amazing workshopper. I am an amazing presenter. But to bring and that's short. Like probably the longest workshop I've ever done is probably a 4-week workshop where I've come in.
Wow.
But to do that every day and to make it exciting for kids is exhausting. And I just didn't have that stamina. Right?
Is that what your students would say? I'm gonna guess no. I know you well enough, even though I haven't seen you in a while. I'm gonna guess no.
Oh no, I think and I probably I'm still keeping in touch with my first set of like second and third graders now. One is a principal, probably like my baby. Ariel Amaya, he's a principal now in New York for his first year. God love him being a first year principal during COVID time. But he followed my path, went to my college alma mater and everything.
Oh, by the way, brag about that, because you have a master's in what is it? My notes are in front of you. From Columbia.
Yeah, multicultural education from NYU, and then I went to Columbia for nonprofit management.
Yeah, no big deal, no biggie.
But I really love that, seeing the outcome of kids. It wasn't important for me to see it daily. And I left I was working in public school, and I left it for a reason.
Yeah. So did I.
So, and I think, it's the reason I came back. I was working with a school of, there were 900 kids in school, K through 8, first generation kids going to school, high school and college. And I probably got 30 a year into colleges. Mm-hmm. And I thought I was working uphill in the system. It's really understanding systemic racism in that sense, and institutionally, and being like, all right, I'm using so much of my energy to get 30 kids out a year. What happens if I'm at a place of privilege where I'm teaching those kids how to do this and finding the kids who are interested in doing this? They go work in these public schools, and each one of them is working with 30 kids, right? And that was better use of my time. So that's why I love public school. But I think I was a terrible teacher.
I'm gonna guess no. Did your students understand your background and where you were from and all that whole thing?
You know what? I never brought up the MTV thing.
Really?
Definitely hit that home more.
Okay.
It's really hard to talk about traveling abroad, and maybe this is why I love Ariel so much, because he understood it. And this group of kids, Dixer, Stephanie, these group of kids who ended up going abroad and doing stuff abroad understood it. But there was such a small portion of them when they're trying to figure out just how to get families to cover $200 for a summer school, right? It was just a whole different world. So,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I can relate to that, because I spent 13 years as a public school teacher, and then I taught in a private school for 2 years when I went back to the States. But the reality is, you're absolutely right, because the irony is I'm living. This is so ironic, but I'm living a mile away from where I used to teach, even though I'm not a teacher anymore. Mm-hmm. But I can relate to that, because when I was teaching, growing up the way you and I did, again, not better, not worse, never felt entitled, even though that's what it is. Hey, I got to show you one sidetrack real quick. Look at that.
Yeah.
Hey, Mom. There we go.
We're in the house.
She'll love that. But never better, never worse. I never felt I'm here and people are here. It was well, first off, you and I had similar parents. We were never raised that way, period. It was, you're in somebody else's country. You deal with it. This is what it is. You're not better. You're not worse. You respect the values, the opinions, all that stuff. You're a guest here. That's I think I'm safe in saying that for you, speaking for you, right? But when I came back to the States and I started teaching, it was an eye opener. I mean, I taught 13 years in the public school system in Utah in a very culturally diverse, socioeconomic low end of the the totem pole, so to speak. These kids didn't know any better than to think outside of like a good gig was working at McDonald's. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not saying that, because hell, I grew up in a McDonald's home, right? I mean, my dad was in the corporate side, but but I was trying to get these kids to think, big picture. There is a world outside of this city, this state, things like that. And the thing that I think I did my best at, because sometimes I couldn't relate to where they were coming from. I never lived in one place. I never understood where they were coming from, but I wanted them, and maybe this is a SADAC impact. Here we go again, right? Dream big, think big, and that's one thing that we as teachers, I think we're obligated to do. That was always my teaching intake, I guess. But I was one of those kids that think big, think bigger than yourself. And a lot of kids have gone on and they've either joined the military or they're actually in college or doing things like that. Some kids are actually teachers now, just like you said. It's awesome to see that. but it was more just, I want them to think big and think big picture, because there is such a bigger world out there. There's things you can do. Don't sell yourself short,
Yeah, I do think that they were probably my biggest lesson from them, though, is the challenges of thinking big, right?
Yeah.
So
It wasn't easy.
yeah, I had multiple kids who I'd say, think big, go, you're going to go to college. And they said, okay, I can't get taxes because my dad is here, my mom is there, and I can't make that interview because I got to go home and babysit my brothers and sisters because both my parents are working. And it was just that cycle that hurt my heart so much.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
Very true and very real, and something I can totally relate to. Absolutely. And then there's the other side of things, and the reason I've never publicly admitted this, but it got to the point that I was dying inside, because there were kids I couldn't save, I couldn't help, and those are the ones that get to you. Those are the ones I still think about. There were kids you knew were going to be fine. There were kids you knew that had a chance, and then there were kids like, how do I help this? What do I do?
You said something that I wanted to come back to about acculturation that I think was harder for you than me. I got really frustrated with white people coming back to the United States.
Talk about that.
The white people that I grew up with knew the world. They were open to the world. They knew that they were visitors in their country. They were completely antithesis and stereotype in my world of what was happening there. We talked about culture. We talked about differences. We talked about celebrating those in different ways. And as you said, and maybe because, again, it was all class-based, right? It's not like we were going down to the cage houses and doing work in the cage houses in Hong Kong, right? But then coming back and seeing the flip side of it, I saw some of my classmates who, again, looked like you, and they would hear things and they would be like, oh my God, I'm not that person.
Yeah.
Right. And that sadness, and I want to say disgust, but it was more sadness of being associated with that mindset. Right. And so I'm talking about like whiteness, and not by any means a color, but in a way of thinking that was so against what I understood my peers to be.
I love that. And I'm not knocking you at all, because the number one thing that I got to take a breath here, because I could go off on so many angles here. Two things, if you don't mind me talking for a minute. I know you're the guest.
Not at all.
If you don't mind me talking. You know my parents. You knew my dad. You know my mom. My brother and I were not privileged, even though we were growing up overseas. My dad left McDonald's after Hong Kong. He worked on his own. My mom was part of his company, and then she also worked as a director at a preschool in Taipei. They busted their asses. They worked our asses off. Sorry for the language, Mom. I know she's watching. Perfect people? No, there's no such thing. But the one thing from the day we moved, the day we got off the airplane in Hong Kong, my brother and I knew there's no such thing as gosh, I don't know why. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. Screw it. It's my show, right? I can say what I want.
Do you?
Yeah, there was no such thing as privilege. It may look that way from the outside looking in, but that's not how my brother and I were raised. Try things, appreciate what you're going through, learn, accept. You're not better, you're not worse. It's just the way it's the cards you were dealt, period. That didn't make a lot of sense to me growing up. Probably by college, it finally kicked in. Because like you just said, I grew up and I know, and this is probably going to piss a lot of people off. I'm sorry, it's true. The ugly American thing. Exactly what you're talking about. I went back overseas a couple of years ago. The people I could not relate to, the people I could not, there weren't a ton, but there definitely were there. And it's not just Americans. There were Europeans and New Zealanders, Australians, things like that. But it's people that just put themselves on a pedestal that I could not accept. It's not, you're not better. Like, it made no sense to me. And it's still that way. It's not politics. I don't want to get into that, but the opportunity that we had growing up, it didn't hit then, but it hits now. I'm so thankful for.
Yeah.
Maybe it started to hit then. I don't know. But like, I'm more appreciative now than maybe I should have been then.
Yeah. I think so. I'm going to go against what you said.
Okay.
I think you were absolutely taught that it was a privilege.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And that's why you do respect it and understand it and appreciate it.
Good point.
It was a privilege for us to grow up abroad. Not everyone had that. You knew you were different from it. I just didn't understand how that privilege impacted my identity until much later. Right.
Exactly. I agree with you on that. Totally.
So, I mean, and I look at it now and, I talk to expats now for work all the time. Mm-hmm. The expat life that we grew up with is no longer.
Yeah.
Right. They don't pay for education the way that they did now, unless you're working for the UN or certain things, or you don't, things like, leave time. What was that? That's on your time. You pay your own darn, flights,
airfare, right? Yeah.
Airfare. And I was like, what? My dad didn't pay for a flight for me until I was in college. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that huge privilege and understanding it is something I crave. When I am sick, like when Martha's like, what do you need? I was like, I just need a hotel bed and room service. And I am very clear about my privilege and asking for that. Like there's, for those of us who are in admissions and travel internationally, the number of Facebook posts that we were like, I just want room service and I want my passport stamped and I want a massage, right? And I am very clear. Like I want a $6 massage. I really do, But yeah, I definitely, if I could afford my kids that life, I would love it. I would love it.
You're 100% right. And getting back to the privilege thing, I mean, I guess that's what I was. You're right. I'm not arguing with you at all. I'm totally on board. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's that ugly American thing. My parents had none of that. Like, no, that's not happening. But you're right. There is definitely a side of this, whether we perceive it or not. Yes, we were privileged.
I remember in college, I took a J term in college. Mm-hmm. We did theater in New York. I guess and my sister was already working there in theater as well. And I was eating a roast chicken. And I remember the person I was having dinner with, there was 3 people and they didn't know who I was. And I was literally just cutting off this leg. And they're looking at me like I was like eating the most disgusting, like dead carcass. And I remember being like, how would you feel if you were sitting in a restaurant right now watching somebody eat some chicken feet? I was like, right? Versus back home, that's just normal, right? And
do you remember Seaview down at Repulse Bay?
What?
Do you remember Seaview, that restaurant? Seaview. Yeah, that was our go-to. We'd eat there once a week, and it's not there anymore. But that's talk about home and memories. Yeah, that's yeah. Hey, guess what?
You're gonna tell the story.
I am gonna tell a story because we have 8 minutes left, and I have 3 more questions for you.
Okay.
But before we do that. This is probably the coolest story I have to tell since I've been doing this show. I don't even know anymore. I think it's like episode 38 or something, 39 maybe. So Metta and I obviously go way back, those of you that are watching. Jason Hotfinger, if you're listening, I don't know if you are, but this is cool. Tim Wanger, if you're listening, you'll appreciate this too.
And we've seen each other since 5th grade.
Yeah.
We had
you and I have noticed. Yeah, we hadn't seen each other, heard each other, nothing.
Nothing since 5th grade.
0. Zilch. I mean, we're talking, and that was 1985.
Right. And so fast forward to 1993.
Yeah. Almost 20 years later, literally.
Right. Okay.
So my buddy Tim went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Tim was the first guest that I had on the show, by the way.
Awesome.
Best man at my wedding. I was at his, all that stuff. Long story short, he went to college in Daytona Beach, Florida, and I'd never been there. I was living in North Carolina at the time, and Jason Hoffinger and I drove down to Daytona to see Tim at spring break, and we're doing the Daytona thing, and we're out walking around enjoying the lifestyle, so to speak. We weren't 21, but let's put it this way: we're having a good time. We're out walking on basically the strip of Daytona, if there is one. Correct me if I'm wrong, Metta. I'm just going to tell you my version.
In a car.
Yeah. We were in Jason's Bronco 2. I can still see it. It was blue and white. It wasn't even a full Bronco. It was a Bronco 2. I don't even know if they make them anymore. So we're driving. We're on the strip. Out of nowhere, we're at a stoplight. People on the sidewalk. There's about 6 or 7 people. I hear this voice. I turn to my buddy who did not go to HKIS. He was a TASer, so he was a Type A American school guy. I said, "Hold up, pull over." He pulls over. He's like, "What's wrong? What's going on?" Just hold up. And I kept listening to the group conversation, and somebody was screaming and yelling at somebody. Oh, this makes me laugh, man. Oh, I just said, like, you just know somebody's voice, somebody who's in your DNA for whatever reason. You just understand. I said, "That's Metta Dael." I didn't see it. I hadn't visually connected the dots yet. He's like, "Who?" And I went, "Don't worry about it." I turn around. I look out the door. You're still screaming at somebody. I don't know if somebody did you wrong. I don't know if some like guy or girl, whatever, you were pissed at, but you were just screaming. Now, keep in mind, it was like 1 a.m. So, I mean, at that point, nothing good ever happens, right? So I looked out the window. I'm like, "That's Metta Dael's voice. I know it for a fact." And he kept going like, "Who the hell's Metta Dael?" And I explained it to him. He's like, "Really?" And I yelled your name out of the car. All of a sudden, silence. And yeah, you turned and you went, "Yeah? Who wants to?" And then you saw me and it was like, "Ben?" I'm like, "You got to be kidding me."
So I remember a little differently.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, it's only been about 20 years, so maybe my interpretation is different.
My friends that was with me said, they're like, "Metta, someone is screaming your name in that car." And I said, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, they're like a bunch of guys in that car screaming your name." And I was like, "What?" And so I go marching over there. And I remember my friend being like, "Are you crazy? Why are you going over to that car?" I'm like, "How many people know my name, Metta?" They're like, "Metta, maybe somebody heard you screaming your name." And I poked my head in, didn't see you. Yeah. And it was Jason sitting in the car. And I go, "Is somebody calling Metta?" And he says to me, "Are you Metta Dael?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Did you go to school in Hong Kong?" And I was like, "What?" And then he said, "Do you know this guy?" And he pulls you out of the back seat.
Okay, I was in the back.
And I remember just going, "Ben effing Vogel." Yeah. Doing, and you guys didn't have a place to stay that night.
No, because you know why? We got booted out of Tim's dorm because the dorm police kicked us out.
And you crashed in our room.
We
and
did.
12 of us in our room.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was meant to be, but that's a hell of a story. Either way, yes. That out of nowhere, right? It'd been 20 years.
Funny thing, there's a girl that I went to camp with in 8th grade in New Hampshire, and she ended up coming to NMH. Sarah Noel, this is you. And we were sitting back to back in the NMH dining hall, and I hear someone going, "I know that voice." And she goes, "Metta?" And I turned around, I'm like, "Oh my God, Sarah Noel." And she started there, and I was like, here it is. Here's the first time that happened, and now here's the second. Oh my goodness.
That was wild, and I love that story.
Good story.
If I remember it, we hung out for the next day and a half.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, all your friends, all my friends, it was great. It was a good time. I mean, that's
so of all places.
Yeah.
Doing the fresh.
I mean, we could have like a minute before, a minute behind. It never would have happened. It was just that moment in time, that stoplight, boom. And I heard you. I don't know who the hell you were pissed at. I'm glad I wasn't on the receiving end of that.
I remember I was yelling at somebody because I was the sober one at that point, and they were all running around like craziness. And I was yelling at people, being like, trying to keep people safe. And that's why other girl got mad at me, because there I was walking up to a car full of men being like, "Who said my name?"
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Oh, God, so great.
Hey, we have a minute, and usually I ended this by asking you 3 questions. We're gonna skip over the first 2. Don't worry about the something people don't know about you. Or you know what? I'm gonna let you answer. You can either answer what is something people don't know about you, if you could have a chat with anyone for an hour, who would it be, or where is there still a place that you want to travel to that you haven't been to? Answer once. You have about 45 seconds.
I think you might say the same thing. My pops.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's still so much unsaid. Right. And right before my dad died, probably a year before, I started Google mapping all the places he had been to, which I loved. And we are fighting because there are places I would type on the Google map that were no longer countries because they were like part of Eastern Europe and borders changed.
Yeah.
And there's so many. So my dad was adopted, and I'm just reconnected with his birth family. And there's so many stories that are crossing that I don't know yet. And I'm just starting to learn them, and I want to hear his side.
Love it.
Yep.
Hey, thank you so much. I love you. This is awesome. I could talk to you forever, and we haven't even talked in years either way. So
I do cookies, Mrs. McKinney. Thanks.
yeah, she just said that. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Hey, stick around. Don't go anywhere. You and I'll chat after we end this. But Metta, thank you so much for doing this. Those of you that are watching, thank you so much. This has been BenThere, episode 9, season 2. We will see you, I guess, next week. Take care of everybody.